We're chatting about storytelling in the age of conversational interfaces. My name's Oren Jacob. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called PullString. That's very happy to be here. First, thanks to Google for inviting me here, Google's home team, other folks in the speech recognition team, the folks at API, Google Cloud, and the various friends and relatives, actually, in Mountain View you work with, broadly speaking. In particular, let's get started with the talk. There we go. I work at PullString.com, and this is a picture of the PullString platform and its authoring environment. We'll do 2 slides about PullString and then 58 slides about everything else. But I want to motivate the talk here because this is a professional platform for computer conversation. Authoring environment and integrated ML, hosted runtime, analytics, collaboration for text and voice form, including for Google Home. So the Diddy skill out today was built in PullString and live today. So if you want to go talk to Diddy and have it sing back to you what you said, you can do that with your new Google Home that Google gave to everybody. Thank you, Google, for the nice gifts. But today's talk, I'm going to start a little farther back. This is Robert McKee. And Robert McKee wrote a very fancy book called Story. There's some quotes from it here. And Robert McKee's made a career out of educating people in the screenplay trade about how to build characters and craft dialogue, broadly speaking. We're going to motivate this talk from that place and talk about ways and design motifs, challenges and opportunities when building conversational interfaces is the point of today's talk. This first quote from McKee, true character is revealed in the choices a human makes under pressure. The deeper the revelation, the truer the choice of the character's essential nature. One of the principles of screenwriting, and to motivate that for a second, by the way, prior to starting PullString, I had spent 20 years working at Pixar. Who has seen a Pixar movie in their life? Raise your hand. No, come on now, raise your hand. Okay. Whose favorite film was Bug's Life? No, okay. Nemo, right? Come on. We'll talk more in a second. Well, one of the things that's always considered at the studio that I worked at across the bay for many years is under what pressure do you put the characters that are in your story, and at what point do those characters make very important decisions? And the decisions they make under pressure is what reveals through the dialogue that they use. That's an important word for our talk here about conversational interfaces. The dialogue they use, how they express what they do under pressure, and the decisions they make is how we understand more about those characters and where they come from. Here's McKee's book. So McKee spent, I think he's passed away now, but 20, 30, 40 years of doing like 3-day-long Tony Robbins-style seminars. So instead of spending $2,000 and go sitting at a Marriott for three days, you can buy the book for like $19. And that's good because McKee was a very sharp, I'll say, speaker. He enjoyed trashing most of the work produced in Hollywood publicly in front of the folks who had done it, was sort of his shtick. And you pay $2,000 for the privilege. $20 is a better deal. And it includes really, 300, 400, 500 pages of analysis and advocacy in the space. I'm going to pick out just a couple of highlights from today. So if you want to do some good reading afterwards, you can check that book out. And you'll find a lot of the stuff in here referenced from McKee. So I want to talk about 3 other particular quotes we'll get started with here to level set what it means to reveal character under pressure. Pressure is essential to the communication of true character to audiences. And if nothing's at risk, and you choose to tell the truth in a situation where a lie would gain you nothing, the choice is trivial and the moment expresses nothing. This is well characterized as asking the question, hey, Google Home, what's the weather in Mountain View today? We all expect Google Home to know that and answer the question with a high of 86 degrees. Here's the forecast high current temperature being 79, as I discovered at the Happy Raspberry Pi integrated drink mixer built by API out there, which is pretty cool. I like the peach one myself. However, if the same character insists on telling the truth, when a lie would save their life, then we sense that honesty is at the core of his nature. This is the case when you ask really any personal assistant or really anything in conversation as a conversation interface, a question it might not know the answer to. You've now placed that agent, that action, that bot in an awkward position, either because they didn't understand what you said, so intent was not recognized properly. Perhaps earlier in the pipeline, speech recognition may have borked and given something wrong back to the intent recognizer, or ultimately, maybe, that's not a thing within scope. As demoed by the Happy Drink Mixer out there half an hour ago, I think it was Chris was the guy demoing, is that right? So Chris said, hey Google, what's on the menu today? And the assistant didn't know and said, I don't know. And then he then went into the particular thing they had built that knew that was understanding the menu agenda and ingredient items, broadly speaking. But when you answer, what you say back is important because at that point there is pressure. You've pushed the conversation interface to a place that the thing you designed does not know how to accommodate it. So first, can you understand what was said back and know you don't know what to say? And then how do you defer? Do you either say, I don't know, politely? Do you say, bunk, bunk, checking Wikipedia? Do you give an answer and carry on anyway? And the choice you make there in particular, in the areas that are out of scope for the action that you're designing, are probably the most important point in design that communicates the tone, mood, and style of what you're trying to build and how you expect users in your audience to feel about the thing that you're building. You might expect that, I'm picking some examples out of thin air here, an Uber action, a Bank of America action, a Southwest Airlines action, and a Lyft action would all answer quite differently if you ask them questions they don't know about, because the tone, mood, and style of those brands and companies are very different. And that's what it talks about today. And that's McKee at the end of one of his story seminars that always does a standing ovation at the end because he takes the last 2 hours to tear apart the various plot lines in Casablanca, which is a fun thing to go read. There's some point, if you check Google Images, you can find the graphs he draws for that. And at the end of that 2 hours, we all cry and weep with joy. We've had a story revealed to us finally. Buy a book for $20 on the way out, please. Thank you. That's how that plays out. So moving on past. Let's define conversation for a second here. Sort of scope the talk more specifically. Picked off Google earlier today, an informal exchange of ideas, spoken words. More casually, two people talking back and forth using natural language. In computer conversation, we're going to swap out one of those people and swap them in with a very fancy computer, Google Cloud being one of the fanciest ever built on the planet Earth today, in fact. But even if we do that, we cannot separate having a conversation from thinking about whom we're having that conversation with. Those things are inextricably linked, and they have been since you were born, because everybody you've talked to, or more importantly, has talked to you, actually had a personality and a tone, a mood, and a style. So here's a quote you should recognize. It is not Luke, I am your father, the most misquoted line in movie history. It's no, I am your father, for those nerds in the audience. Empire Strikes Back. There you go. No, I am your father. There we go. To be or not to be, Act 3, Scene 1 of William Shakespeare's Hamlet, holding a skull. I have a dream, right on for Dr. King here in DC. I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that. Hal, and Mommy, which is, of course, my kids. So in each one of these cases, I brought the examples up both to be very specific, very general, to be public and to be private, to be fictional and non-fictional, to be current and historical, and future tense as well, too. In all circumstances in these quotes, I bet you, who here in the audience recognized the vast majority of them immediately? Raise your hands, please. There we go. And back at home on the live stream, raise your hands at your desk. I can't see you. Okay. That's why I'm going to explain to folks here and get the point across very strongly that as you design the dialogue in the Google actions that you build and in the things you build for Google Assistant, when you're using language back and forth, it is utterly essential that you contemplate both intent and content, both understanding, which is an important part of what we do here in the tent here, and also responding back in how we design that dialogue, because you always associate what's said with who says it behind it. In fact, we learn about each other through the use of language, and we do that at two levels, both on the surface and below the surface, at subtext and at context. And I use the iceberg metaphor here sort of bluntly, because what's said at the surface, being the context of our conversation, is an important part of what gets communicated in a conversation. But all the other things underneath, which take different expressions in text and voice form, add a whole heck of a lot, if not even the majority, of your long-term conception of the experience. Subtext can be, in voice form, prosody. Am I talking super high really fast? Or am I going mellow, dude? Means quite different things. Do I uptick at the back, the way I talk? Or do I nod and downbeat? In text form, it's how long does a bot take to respond back and forth? Do I see typing indicators? Does the bot make spelling errors on purpose or actually randomly back and forth? Does the bot understand leet speak? Does the bot understand emoji? Does it understand animated GIF? Can it respond back with emoji, animated GIF, or English, or Spanish, or Spanglish? So North American normative English from an AP English test given in high school is not what we speak in messaging platforms in text or voice form. It's actually quite different. And understanding all the other things that aren't just the blunt context around the experience strongly communicates to users and audiences the tone, mood, and style of what you're building. Let's go down to the question of personification. I'm talking a lot about characters here, but we're, on the other hand, building actions for Google Home. So yes, I worked on this film. But it happens to also be the case that this is the main theme of every Pixar film ever made, are things that aren't human actually talking back in language, back and forth. Toys talk, fish talk. I mean, they don't, but they do in these movies. And it's actually quite common for us to personify all kinds of things. That's because we're people. And when language gets involved, we've only been talking to other people with language since we were all born. So it makes obvious sense that if you hear a thing or see a thing typed back and forth to you, you will project human traits onto that thing. Your app has a character and a backstory, and a motivation, tone, mood, and style, because everything you've ever talked to also does as well, too. If you don't design for that and deliver it to people, people will still assign it to your thing, whether you want them to do that or not. That actually is both good news and bad news. There are two stories to tell here. On the good side, personification will help you as... Who's your developer themselves? Raise your hand. Really? Try again. Who's a developer here? OK. Who's actually built a thing that involves natural language in their life in some way, shape, or form? Keep your hands up. Who's here? Now we're going to split left, right hand. Who here's done a thing in text? Oh, text stuff? And hands for voice stuff? OK, even split. OK. Personification helps you in both cases because the use of language will engender us to assign personal traits to the thing that we're engaging with. And if I do that, I've invested in it. Therefore, I have a hand in creating that relationship, whether it's conscious or unconscious. But that's a benefit to engagement and retention, broadly speaking. On the downside, if you don't consider that and design for it very carefully, you're effectively going to let your audience of users randomly assign the personality traits they would like you to your particular app, action, or bot. And in that case, it's not clear what they're going to think about it. So I would strongly advocate you be in control of that as not. To disregard character in design is equivalent to saying letting a user pick random colors and button locations for your GUI. One of the main differentiating designs of Google way back in the day, which still do today, thankfully, is the remarkably simple and direct expression of Google.com's homepage. One of the gifts to the internet that is still one of the joys of web surfing in general, to the juxtaposition of all the other ones that didn't do that. They're not here, you guys still are. I'm glad to be here with you, because you guys win in that regard. But you certainly wouldn't want someone to re-scramble the Google homepage to look all Alta Vista style. That's not very helpful to anybody's cause. So by asserting the dialogue that you have in your things that you write as well too, you are doing the equivalent to button layout, GUI layout, color palette selection, responsiveness designs as well too, the kinds of feedback, whether you want to go skeuomorphic or not, with the interfaces we build in GUIs, but different in voice interfaces. And while it still might work, yes, you could type text into an old Alta Vista search if you cared to. As a functional spec requirement, I didn't really care. Turns out none of the rest of the world did either too. So, scooting on to foundations of design and computer conversation. A way to think about this, and also one of the reasons I started the talk mentioning Robert McKee, was you can kind of think about this space as interactive screenwriting. But the trick is that for us in this tent, we're responsible for lines 1, 3, 5, and 7, but not 2, 4, 6, and 8. 2, 4, 6, and 8 are everything said back to us by the user. And interestingly enough, we have actually no control at all over those. That's what's said back to us. And that's an important distinction because this isn't actually true in GUI designs. In GUI designs, you're asserting what text entry points you're putting up, what dialog boxes, what buttons, what sliders, and widgets you have. In this case, language is the response back. And language is a very unconstrained space. Part of this craft comes from traditional screenwriting, stage writing, theater, prose, character story, and dialogue, the linear narrative arts. And there's a lot of literature. I'll give you only one reference here to look at in that space. The other half of this comes from the art of gaming and web mobile design and creating engagement and retention, the interactive arts in those designs. And this field of crafting interactive conversation is one of the unique blends of these two things. There are analogies we can make to some degree. In the space of video game design, whether that's mobile, web, or console, or desktop, or otherwise, there is a similar combination to some degree. But it's just now in the past 10 or 15 years that the fields of interaction design and the fields of linear narrative have begun to cross each other. And I think in the space here, particularly with text and voice-based design, is one of the most important expressions of that new combination, and a fun place to work. So here are three of the sort of pretty elemental concepts to consider as we go into design here. One is the concept of fidelity, and it's a related word here is adjacency. Computer conversation always happens adjacent to real-life, full-fidelity, human-to-human conversation. If you're talking to your Google Home and it's sitting on your kitchen counter, you're probably at breakfast with your kids and your wife and husband, having a lovely morning conversation, and then you're heckling Google Home to do a thing for you, whether it's play music or control your lights or order something as well too. But it's happening right in and amongst your family already talking. If you're texting back and forth with a bot, that's probably happening on a messaging platform somewhere or on your phone, where there already are a billion other folks texting back and forth with you who are all actual humans. So the adjacency issue is actually very distinct from the other things I mentioned earlier on in this talk. That is not true of the art of video gaming. I'm going to go nerd out with my Xbox or play on my Android phone sitting on BART. It's not the case that I was just playing chess or Rochambeau with the guy next to me on BART, probably. So the game adjacency issue is quite separated. I played with my family Monopoly over here, and I brought out my Android phone and went play Clash of Clans over there. But in this case, it probably is true that I'm texting back and forth with a billion other folks who have mobile phones, N billion other folks who have phones out there in the world, and my bot's engaging me then, or Google Assistant is in text form, and my Google Home is sitting in my house. Also, I'm a nerd in my office too, but let's go at my house for now. And in my house, my family is there speaking back and forth. That means the bar one has to reach of adjacency is actually all of us talking to each other. And that's essential to this field. That's a super high bar. There's been a lot of heckling about bots this past year back and forth, less because we're reaching for human fidelity conversation, not because, then people say, like, the public's expectations were so high. I think it's just a blunt truth. It's against all of us talking to each other. So we have to accommodate that need. And that also speaks, I think, broadly to, should the things you write be able to make a joke? Should they be able to answer questions about the topics you're building for, travel, finance, e-commerce, whatever it is, or answer the questions about everything? I'm going to pick that last one up for a second. There's been a theme I've seen when it comes to text and voice-based work produced in the space that I'm texting or talking back and forth to this particular action. It should be able to respond to any question that I asked and do so in a way that's quite informative. But that's not true of any of us in this tent. None of us knows everything. In fact, while Google doesn't know everything, at least it organizes it all for us, so it's super helpful, but doesn't actually know everything in the world is not knowable. So that expectation is unusually pressed upon actions and bots because we don't press it upon ourselves actually ever. And if you spoke to someone who actually knew everything, I think you've crossed into some other plane of existence that I can't describe for us. That's not true of our reality. So that also I use that motivating case to talk about specificity design. And if you're talking about an e-commerce experience or travel or hospitality or fitness, and you're building that for Google Home, making that be the most amazing fitness thing you can talk to back and forth seems quite appropriate to do, but not answer questions about geography or about history, but find a way to actually move the conversation back in the tone, mood, and style that a fitness instructor would do to get you back to your fitness-based actions. Talk about agency for a second. So today, I think Kurzweil may have a different opinion about this, but synthetic, autonomous, emergent personality today is nowhere close to human fidelity yet. It may get there, in which case I'll be back here talking in a few years about that agenda, but that's not true today. But is that a problem for us? And I don't think it is today, because the world of fiction, here's some Game of Thrones cosplayers that I found up there. I like the Mario ones in the previous slide, as a way to motivate fictional characters in our day-to-day lives, suggests that specifically crafted characters and designed behaviors can be as or more effective because they've been created to match the situations and outcomes we need them for. Going back to my fitness example, just picking that out of thin air here for Google Home, any fitness experience that I'm talking back to on Google Home will be designed by maybe someone in this tent, as opposed to the actual person at the gym who could have got a parking ticket, got a decaf coffee by accident at Starbucks instead of their caffeine coffee, and was kind of cheesed off in your spin class, and brought that attitude into the class as well too. And that might not be the most helpful thing for you at the time, trying to work out with your Google Home as you get back to your kitchen. I think that if you look at this slide also too, a relevant point to make here is that, laying back to earlier in the talk, when I brought up Hamlet, I threw down a quote from a thing that's on the order of 500 years old, so half a millennium old. And people all got that. So the lasting legacy of character and dialogue can span not generations, millennium of time, already does today, in the form of written word and spoken word in live theater and stage play. So the ideas that are presented when you design a character and personality can strongly reach across history and give you a sense of the depth and strength of that advocacy in our design work. And I had to throw up, because I was doing cosplay here as a motivating case, that's a lot of stormtroopers. And it turns out they've actually formed a brigade and walk around themselves. They spend about as much time doing this as people in the military reserve do here in this country, it turns out. While I support Star Wars and maybe our US military as well, and then for Lucasfilm in this one, because that's pretty cool they do that. All right, so on to creativity. Am I a computer scientist, or should I become one? Or am I a writer, and should I become one? Both of these are highly creative pursuits, but with different emphases. It depends on what you're trying to do. There are many things that are built in the space of computer conversation that are transactional based in e-commerce, banking and fund transfers as well too. And those things are very efficient and compact expressions. There are also things that are built that have much more sort of poetic intentions. Interactive fiction, broadly speaking, mysteries, romance, the genres of literature also can be expressed this way as well too. And in between, kind of says everything else. Deciding who is writing your dialogue and who's thinking about your dialogue design, I think, should be motivated by those cases back and forth. But the spectrum exists in this field, and I want to talk about celebrating both sides of this for the rest of this talk. Creativity is just connecting things from Steve. I had to throw that quote down here for us today. So 3 topics in particular, getting specifically to designing of actions directly, and voice-based skills, and content, intent, and context. Keywords, mice, and touch screens are all examples of high precision, high accuracy, and unambiguous inputs. Was the button pressed or not? But they have a very small aperture. Got a button click, got a key press. Language is hugely imprecise, terribly inaccurate, utterly ambiguous, and has near infinite aperture, but it can be shockingly efficient. And it's in this juxtaposition here that the most important differences about how we design sort of come to surface now. I throw up the words love and hate here for a second, because in 4 characters, both sides, nations go to war, peace treaties are signed, humanity advances itself at a level of just 4 simple characters, also with the bracket and the slash as well too. It's impossible to express that in a GUI interface. So with a voice and language interface, you can, and you even get to all things like awkward. Here, great picture of a monkey's face here. The concept of awkwardness is a very interesting proposition, because it presupposes you understand what the monkey in the face should have been doing. Why does it look funny or sarcastic to you as it relates to other faces that you've seen with goofy smiles and selfies? It's all a set of information encapsulated in that word next to that image. We invented language, in fact, to communicate the human condition in all of its complexity, ambiguity, and subtlety. And so the design principles themselves now and practices that help us handle this in a medium whose boundaries are that brass include content and intent. Intent recognition, as we all know, is a thing that many people focus on in this field, including Google with API.ai's offerings and other places in the Google network of things. And that's good. That's understanding what's said inbound to us by a user. And I do celebrate that, but it's half the problem. The other half of the problem is content, which is as important and requires equal attention from both our tools and our processes on both sides. If you're looking at the amount of effort put in to building an action for Google Home, and you have a 10-week project to work on, 10 person weeks to assign to it, if you're spending 8 person weeks designing your intents and like 3 days writing dialogue and then debugging, you've not spent your resources in a way that represents what the design requirements really are of the project. Those 2 things are actually almost bang on even money, broadly speaking. Because half of a conversation is understanding what you say to me, and the other half is me answering back to you in response back. You have to contemplate both of those things evenly. I think as an industry, we way over-index on intent recognition. I understand why that's a problem computer scientists are very well schooled to go solve. That makes perfectly reasonable sense. It's also a thing we didn't have before. So we had to go build machine learned recognized intents, and that's great. We have those in advancing now going forward day by day. As a field that produces work now in the space for audiences and users to use and engage, contemplating both what's understood and what's said back with even measure is an advocacy I want to bring to you guys today. Iteration and creative control. Iteration time enables creative expressivity and reach. How efficiently can I do a thing? The faster I do it, the better I can make it. The background of the slide I chose specifically because this is a gesture drawing agenda taken by done by a woman, Elaine Horry, I found online, licensed to be used here for you guys to see, and was done in a session often sitting down with the model and drawing various gestures in these styles. So here has a guess for how long it took her to do that many drawings. Throw a number out. 20 minutes over here. Did I hear a week over there? Just a couple days. These are probably done, I'm guessing, at about 30 seconds to 1 minute per, broadly speaking. Typically, a lunch session is done in the studio where you're drawing as fast and rapidly as you can. And one of the reasons why, if you're going to spend 4 years making an animated film, you want to nerd out at lunch, drawing rapidly, is you could iterate through dozens and dozens of poses for a character in the course of a 2-hour span before you spend the time to dental floss it in the film. Finally, it's from my previous life. In this life here, how long does it take me to debug my bot? Why did the thing answer back the way it did, and what is it saying next? Oh, I have to go build a thing and recompile it and push it out to the cloud and carry on as well too. Or can I see it live and where I'm working right now today? The time it takes you as a developer out there to run a full loop to understand what broke and how to fix it, as we all know from being software developers, is an essential contributor to our efficiency in that area. So I want to push that forward here in the space of computer conversation, that it's not just how fast can I design my intent, it's not just how fast I can write my dialogue. It's when I have the thing stood up and running, and now I'm chatting back and forth a bit or talking back and forth to it, how long in clock time is the actual loop from it saying a thing I didn't want it to say to me fixing it and saying it the right way next time. Measure that on the clock, and when you're down from 8 hours to 1 hour to 15 minutes to a minute to actual real time, you've walked yourself from a year-long project to a 3-day-long project as well. More importantly, though, than the budget implications are if you're at a place where in real time you're editing and working and fixing things, you're then going to start experimenting. You're then going to start playing with a thing, and you're going to find what you can achieve in conversation will then expand significantly beyond a graph-laid, connected, very simple diagram of say this, then go here. Well, I'll start there, but because language is so expressive, our users will do this to us anyway. So it's an important way to think about the tool sets that you use and the process you bring to bear to measure the efficiency of it and how fast you can fix and adapt things. Predictability is a critical design agenda here as well too. Often, we're asked to throw more data at machine learned intent recognizers because they'll get better. Well, for the folks in this room, I bet you probably understand what that means, but a lot of the rest of the world might not, and in particular, what data and how much? And if I did that, how would it change? Linearity isn't the requirement here, predictability is. And I think that as many more folks out there become educated about the techniques of machine learned intent recognition, broadly speaking, folks beyond this intent will get better at being able to do this in the wild. But today, this is a real struggle for a lot of folks in developers who aren't at Google, but are outside building their own things in computer conversation in text or voice form. For them to improve their machine learned intents, broadly speaking, is a challenge I share with you. We all share as an industry to help us understand how to better work with things. I use the idea of a black box here because you'd never want a black box in a creative agenda. And I had a picture of a bike here on purpose. So who here knows how to ride a bike? All hands should go up. Yeah, okay. If I'm on a bike and I stand off and I take my hand on the seat and I shove the bike down the street, what does the bike do? Anybody? Fall over? Immediately? No. It rolls forward for some period of time, but who here and doing kind of this, what, and then it will cliff out. Who here can explain to me the physics behind how that actually works in a closed form solution? Anybody? No, it's actually not describable by modern mechanics today in a closed form solution, interestingly. But yet, you all raise your hands because you can ride a bike. A bike is a remarkably nonlinear, mechanical, dynamic mechanism. We in our minds have all understood how to lean reverse back, adjust the handlebar incorrect against the steer to get the lean over to get the bike to turn, even though no physics professor at Cal or Stanford could whiteboard out how that actually works in a closed form solution today. So a good example from all of our lives, including my young kids' lives, about the human mind's ability to map a predictable, very complex system and work with it very, very creatively, even though it's not linear. And now I'm going to tie this together with context. This word is like super overused in this space, so I'm going to try to talk about this a little bit quite directly here. First, at a high level, context is the mental scaffolding that we and our technology need to help us manage complexity, hence the Pantheon in the back getting rebuilt for you there. Conversation, broadly speaking, is a piecewise linear agenda. If I'm negotiating with you about a pizza order back and forth for a few minutes, and then about my commute home on BART, and then about what I'm doing this weekend going to Tahoe or not back and forth, each one of our pizza discussions and our BART discussions was locally 2, 3, or 4 turns about pizza, and then BART, and then Tahoe. But notice that was pizza, BART, and Tahoe is not connected. Those small piecewise linear bits that connect together we can take large advantage of, because when I'm talking about pizza and nerding out about mozzarella versus pepperoni, I know I'm having that discussion about pizza ordering agendas, not about what the guy next to me was eating on the BART train, which I could be saying in the next agenda. I don't think we take advantage of this enough. And I say this because a lot of systems today built offer giant, long, flat lists of intents to recognize, broadly speaking, and don't use where you are in the context of the conversation to motivate intent recognition and to motivate dialogue going back and forth. That's true in how we build things. It's true in our tool sets. And as a field in general, you can only pull this off if you combine content and intent together, not keep them separated far apart. But brought together, it lets the folks who build actions and bots and other things as well work with both of those things back and forth in and amongst each other as you blend and create in the space together. That's one of the most important points of this talk here. So I tie this down now as we get to a few minutes for Q&A at the end here. We'll talk about one, having gone through all that, I'll leave you the following conundrum, and my favorite Rock'em Sock'em slide, which I had to throw in there too. The more personality that you offer in a thing, the more you'll engage and delight your users, broadly speaking, and the more memorable you will be long term. At the same time, the more personality that you offer, the more you be polarized and segment your audience. Without mentioning names, if you participated in the last US presidential election, there were 2 candidates who, broadly speaking, moved the country into 2 places. I don't think anybody in this country wanted to vote for both of them simultaneously. That would make little sense. That's why there were 2 candidates. I won't go any farther than that. But as an example of, if you went that far with personality, you actually chopped your audience bang on in half. Now, that's not a thing a company like Google can do. You're trying to reach everybody in the world. And of course, me as some awesome rad action developer wants the biggest audience I can get. So therefore, should I withdraw and not do any personality to maintain giant audience? Well, if I built a thing that appealed to absolutely everybody, it would be the definition of the most average thing in the world, which actually is boring to everybody as well, too. Google's not taking that position. Your homepage is not a boring design. It's actually quite a bang-on crisp one. It has been now, again, for going on nearly 2 decades now, to your credit. So what do? Do we go all in Darth Vader and go full personality, or all in plain vanilla and do nothing as well too? And that is the art of the space. That's a judgment call. But I won't leave you with just a hanging, I don't know. There's no right answer here. But as a thought, creating one average personality I don't think is a likely path to the right answer. My best suggestion is to consider a countable plurality of personalities to get a good match for the over 95% case of potential audiences. In the case above, if you just built the average personality, for any individual user, when something more funny or appealing shows up, perhaps Samuel Jackson as you're doing the voice of your banking app, if you're a Capital One, I could imagine that happening. People who like Samuel Jackson will go and be attracted to that and be pulled off the average. The average sitting in the middle is susceptible to any one of the particulars being better, and that plurality will beat them over time. But you can't write a personality for all of them. That would be an uncountable number of personalities. So I think the answer probably plays out here to a countable plurality to meet the largest audience that could get to a 95+% case of coverage of appeal, broadly speaking, to a general global audience. Parting shot for 2 minutes for questions coming up here is that you can check out PullString.com if you want to work with a system that offers those things together. That's what we're trying to build here at PullString, and doing that with Google. And thanks for helping that regard too. If you want to build some awesome actions for Google Home, you can start that like this afternoon. People are fired up to go do that. Thank you all.